Good morning. My name is Renee Buckland. I will be your worship partner this morning, and I want to welcome you to Westminster. Please welcome Reverend Mary and Sylvia.
Hello. Good morning. Our opening words were written by Gretel Ehrlich, writer and naturalist. It's morning in the Absaruka Mountains. The word Absaruka means raven in Native American Crow language. I've come here to seek out the source of a river. And as I make the day-long ascent from a verdant valley, I think about walking and wilderness. In wilderness, I seek the wildness in myself. And in so doing, come upon the wildness everywhere around me because, after all, being part of nature, I'm cut from the same cloth. To trace the history of a river or a raindrop is also to trace the history of the soul, the history of the mind descending and arising in the body. In both, we constantly seek and stumble on divinity, which, like the overhang of snow that feeds the lake and the spring that becomes a waterfall, divinity feeds, spills, falls, and feeds itself over and over again. As we light the chalice, we offer some excerpts from Reverend Scott Taylor, UU minister, in the name of all that leans down and helps us up. May this hour of tender and courageous connection help us fall in love all over again with this wild world. We light the chalice in honor of all that leads us forward, all that leans down and helps us up after we fall, all that reminds us why we started, all that tells us there is still hope and a seed of surprise, even when no light is in sight, even when warmth seems so far away. There is a generosity that feeds our spirit in this wild world.
Good morning. It's great to be back with you all again this morning. Our first hymn is called Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen. It's an African American song. This is a sorrow song, and it is named so, given that these hymns describe the musical compositions that speak of the suffering of enslaved African people in the United States. The intent of the songs was to allow the lyric poet to express the feelings of a people being subjected to unjust treatment. The lyrics convey sadness, and some say these songs are an early form of the blues. Here is Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, and the words are in the chat. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Although you see me going along so, oh yes, Lord, I have my troubles here below. Oh yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. One day when I was walking along, oh yes, Lord, the heavens broke and love came down. Oh yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah.
Please join in the words of our unison affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church and service our mission. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Here in the community, we are here for each other in a host of ways. And in one of the particular ways we can support each other is by being present to each other in what is good and what is hard in our lives. I invite any of you who would like to take a moment, if you would like, to share something on your heart this morning in the chat. And with much gratitude to Donetta for the beautiful music.
That was beautiful. We love your tradition of telling where your chalices are being lit. It's beautiful. Thank you. Our reading is from a journal entry by a 9-year-old young naturalist, Opal Whiteley. She wrote her diaries in the early 1900s and grew up teaching other children about the forest and the ways of the insects and the other places that trees, tall trees and reeds attracted her, the bird song, the insects. As an adult, her life was not easy, but as a child, she freely manifested a kind of crystalline attunement to nature. Here is her child's eye view from over 100 years ago. Very early in the morning of today, I did get out of my bed and I did get dressed in a quick way. Then I climbed out of the window of the house we live in. The sun was up and the birds were singing. I went my way. As I did go, I did hearing of many voices. They were the voices of earth, glad for spring. The birds did have knowing and sang what the grasses and leaves did say of the gladness of living. I too did feel glad feels from my toes to my curls. I went down by the swamp. I went there to get reeds. With the reeds I did find there, I did go a-piping. I went down the creek and out across the field. Every stump I came to, I did climb upon. Most every day I do dance. I dance with the leaves and the grass. I feel thrills from my toes to my curls. I feel like a bird sometimes. Then I spread my arms for wings and I go my way from stump to stump and on and down the hill. Sometimes I'm a demoiselle, flitting near onto the water. Then I nod unto the willows and they nod unto me. They wave their arms and I wave mine. They wiggle their toes in the water a bit and I do so too. And every time we wiggle our toes, we do drink into our souls the song of the brook. The glad song it is always singing. And the joy song does sing on in our hearts. So did it today.
And now we join in a time of meditation. I will lead us out of our shared silence with the song, Give Me Birds at the Dawning. You'll find the words to the song in the chat. Today we join one another in light and in spirit. Here we make tender, courageous reconnections. As this summer folded into fall, and now All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, we honor our ancestors.
And we remember the faces of our summer, those last 5 zinnias. A friend at farmer's market holding a pumpkin picked for a pie. 3 crows in a row on the garden bench. And our pride after doing that thing we had put off for weeks.
All these memories that make our eyes wide, that invite us into a sense of the sacred, coming out of this just one thing after another kind of life. These are the kinds of delights that keep us above water without denying or covering up the challenges.
But instead, offer us feeling the plenty, the allness of our lives. the lifting up of the small but holy moments. And they shine as they beg us to take note, beg us to reignite our trust, assuring us that not every path will be rough.
They tempt us back to joy and leave us dancing to the light, emerging about the branches of the bare, quietly flourishing tree. May our shared silence be to us a blessing. Give me birds at the dawning, birds at the dawning, birds at the dawning, to sing my soul awake. Give me leaves in the autumn, leaves in the autumn, leaves in the autumn, to sing my soul awake. Give me flames in the sunset, flames in the sunset, flames in the sunset, to sing my soul awake. Hear now a story that comes to us through the Cariweo people of Brazil, particularly from Mato Grosso do Sul, one of the states in the Midwestern part of Brazil. The story is called The Red Lily, and the music is a piece called A Holy Thing to Love by Libby Roderick. Once there was a time when death did not last. Death was a kind of sleep from which people would awake after 2 days had passed. That is how Doane, the Creator, had made the world. This is not the way it should be, said Kara, the Creator's companion. There is only so much space on Earth. How can Earth feed everyone if no one dies, if everyone lives forever? In time, there will be so many people that we will run out of food and the earth will be destroyed. Oh, there is much truth to what you are saying, the Creator agreed. From this time on, whenever someone dies, they will not be revived in 2 days. They will remain forever in the slumber of death. It's a human thing, a holy thing, to love what death can take. It's a human thing to love the thing whose loss will cause your heart to break. It's a lovely thing, we can't stop ourselves, even as we wait for the final hush. After some time had passed, Kara's elderly mother died. He loved his mother very much, and so he was heartbroken. He visited the Creator and implored him to bring his mother back to life. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Please don't allow her to remain dead forever. If you would revive your mother," said the Creator, "you need only gather one of the common red lilies that grows in the marsh. Bring the flower to her grave and wrap her hands around its smooth stem. Raise your mother up by this stem and she will come back to life." Kara rushed down to the marsh and found one of the red lilies growing there. It was a beautiful flower with many crimson petals that seemed to reach out and embrace the air above it. Kara picked one of the blooms, being ever so careful to leave it attached to the long, smooth stem, and when he arrived at the side of his mother's grave, he placed the stem of the red lily firmly in her hands. As Kara pulled, his mother's hands began to rise. It's a human thing, a holy thing, to love what death can take. It's a human thing to love that thing whose loss will cause your heart to break. And then the fragile stem broke. Kara began to cry and rushed to the Creator's side. "Go no way, no," sobbed Kara. "The stem of the red lily broke as my mother held it in her hands, and I tried to pull her up by it. But the stem is not strong enough. Is there no other way that she can be brought back to life?" "I'm sorry," the Creator replied. "Your mother cannot be revived from the eternal sleep of death. There is nothing else you can do. To this day, death is a final state. No one comes back to life." It's a lovely thing. We can't stop ourselves. Even as we wait for the final hush. It's a human thing, a lovely thing, a holy thing to love.
Here at Westminster, we share our offering every month with a different organization that shares our values and our mission. This month, the last Sunday in October, we share a half of our designated offering with our very own sharing locker. We reach out to anyone in Washington, Kent County, and Cranston who need assistance by offering household goods, a seasonal farmers market, and pet food. The other half of the offering goes to support all the other good work of this community. You can donate using the link that is now being put in the chat. Your offering is greatly received.
Here's another story, one I heard on NPR years ago. A little boy was crying over his deep yearning for his beloved dog. He could not understand why she'd passed away and gone from him after all. I mean, they were buddies for 8 years. So that night, he thought more about his dog and the loss. And the next morning, he told his mother, "I'm so glad I knew Mitzi. And now I know why she died young. It's because she already learned how to love." If we have compassion for ourselves and others, it turns out that we grow in resilience. And who would have thought that in addition to the special humans and companion animals in our lives, that trees could also be our teachers? They show our heart how to have its wild way with us. But what is compassion to the tree? Well, when we begin to understand how mindful trees are, our empathy naturally deepens for them. Trees are the memory keepers of the land. The shapes of their trunks show the way that the wind has blown over the years. Their wood holds the memory of sunlight and rainfall. They register their histories. How human-like. In the book, Finding the Mother Tree, researcher Suzanne Simard writes that trees clearly communicate through this amazing intertwining underground fungal network, or what the poet would call the divinity in common living dirt. They're underground. They nourish not only their kin, but also other young and struggling trees in order to build strength in the entire community. Our mother trees connect all the forest trees together through this jungle of threads and synapses and nodes, communicating and responding to one another by emitting chemical signals, signals that are similar to our own neurotransmitters. There are summons and there are calls underground, and some are even more mysterious than what we always wonder about. How do those birds find their way thousands of miles south for the winter? The truth is that trees cooperate and collaborate much more than they compete for their strength of the whole forest. And it also turns out that survival to trees means having a healthy diversity among themselves. What could we learn from mother trees? The human standing upright, after all, is only a different upsweep of a tree's purchase on the ground. Our wonderful Greta Ehrlich, naturalist, tells us that we are just a different articulation. So again, in the findings of this book, Finding the Mother Tree, we are hearing the full story of trees and through many people. One is Subaye, a man of indigenous heritage. To his tribe, trees are people, not only with a sort of intelligence akin to us, but also with a kind of spiritual life. They're not merely equivalents to people, they are beings with the same bearings. They are the tree people. And so we hear it again, how tree-like we humans are and how human the tree. The writer of the book says she does not presume to grasp Aboriginal knowledge in any full way. But that knowledge comes from a way of knowing the earth different from that of our own culture's knowing. It speaks of being attuned to the cycles of the moon and the blooming of the bitterroot and the running of salmon, of knowing that we're tied to the land and the trees and the animals and the soil and the water and to one another, of showing humility toward and tolerance for all the things we're connected to in this circle of life. Every tree is valuable to the community, and some partner trees share the light in their canopies and the air around them so tightly at the root that sometimes they even die together. For humans to recognize how plants are attuned to one another's strengths and weaknesses, elegantly giving and taking to attain this exquisite balance. For seeing the wisdom of sharing water in order to keep the community whole, to replenish their companions in times of hardship. That is to also see our own roots and systems interlace and tangle, grow into and away from one another too, and back again in a million subtle moments. Well, it looks as if trees are presenting researcher, mystic, poet, all with puzzles to solve about their power. These gentle creatures offer whole new frontiers for paying attention, like to how they carry water up their trunks, how they braid their roots, and the wrinkle in their skin, just like ours, goes with old age. Poet Wendell Berry has called them apostles of the living light. So one thing is now clear to us. Trees are not competitive crusaders of the self. They are members of a connected, related, communicating system. We are just now beginning to learn the language of trees and how they communicate to make friends and keep family close to them through their nurturing. And there's another side to the research on our human relationship with trees. Korean scientists tracked older women who walked through the forests and also the urban areas with results that in the forests, their blood pressure, their lung capacity, and the elasticity of their arteries improved. In town did not bring that. It's common knowledge that our blood pressure rises in adaptive response to constant threat. And it seems that spending time in the forest is the antidote. In Japanese medicine, the practice of Shindun Yoku, which means taking in the forest atmosphere or forest bathing, is a popular type of preventative healthcare and healing. And as herbalist Sean O'Donoghue has written, the forest reminds us who we are. And if Opal Whiteley were here, she would testify to this. This way of knowing or paying attention requires a bit of transformation. If we can forget what we learned from the head and begin again from starting at our wild heart, it won't be by chance that ourselves or trees stand up against the storm. They stand together, and we humans may choose to be that resilient. When we depend on one another, we build a root structure that serves community. And as for plans for our lives often not going our way, well, at the heart of adversity, we're facing our grief over hopes being dulled or halted. And we know from experience that it is possible at the same time we're grieving to also live out our lives. And yet, a University of Wisconsin study last year found that only 19% of US workers are really resilient. It seems most of our citizens are especially vulnerable to loss and adversity. And after all, it is just plain hard to remain resilient in the midst of uncertainty and things that are not going as planned. Grief for our old way of life knocks us off our foundations. I always return to Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, how he wrote that he learned to think anew. He said, we must turn predicament into achievement. And you can see throughout history, the survivors who thrived among great losses were the ones who found self-compassion through focusing on a few dear memories. Prisoners often imagined talking with loved ones, just having imaginary conversations. Or they pictured themselves back home doing something completely ordinary, like flicking on a light switch. Or they paid attention to the bird song or the colors of the sunset. Some who were starving still gave away their food to someone who seemed greater in need. And these small acts became their purpose in life. They realized that if they could do something purposeful, anything, like helping others, or like listening for birds, they were not beaten down. They could keep going. Sometimes our very survival depends on doing something as simple as finding compassion. And we can keep in mind that the really hard times are sort of an unruly ad campaign for how precious life really is. Our commitment to one another calls for acting with compassion to do what we can to alleviate suffering. Maybe that means taking care of a sick relative or just adjusting our daily lives for the better, making the best with what we have. History shows us that doing just a little bit each day refreshes us, just enough to keep working toward that common good. And after all, we feel compassion, and then it sort of dethrones us from the center of our world and puts another being right there. That is the center of every religion. Get rid of the ego, and we can see the divinity all around us. Rainer Maria Rilke said, if we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise uprooted like the trees. He suggested we not entangle ourselves in struggle and become lonely and confused from that, and instead be like the child who experienced the loss of his first puppy. Lighten the struggle and heaviness through compassion and strengthen our resilience at the same time. As UUs, we can work from the principle of our interconnectedness to the wild world in all its uncertainty, in all that it gives us in beauty and in loss, with each connection deepening our love for it. So in ending, the voice of the poet tells us, come with your joy, but bring your cracked confidence. Let this today be a path away from despair, back to a place of peace. May the sounds in the common living dirt swirl to bring us together. And may the brokenness mend, and may we be woven anew.
Our final song this morning is from the Gray Hymnal, It is For the Earth Forever Turning. It is number 163, and the words will be in the chat. For the earth forever turning, for the skies, for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we a joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures, in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful song to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth, for the joy we sing, returning home to our blue-green hills of earth. As we extinguish our chalice today, I invite you to speak the words, closing words. You'll find these words in the chat. Go in peace. Speak truth. Give thanks each day. Respect the earth and all creatures, for they are alive like you. Care for your body. It is a wondrous gift. Be gentle with yourself. Live simply. Be of service. Be guided by your faith and not your fear. Go lightly on your way. Walk in a sacred manner. May it be so.
Please gather as we sing our final hymn, Carry the Flame.